Good morning, everybody. How we doing? I'm probably not going to stand up here on this platform for too long. I want to make sure I'm interacting with each and every single one of you. I had a phenomenal experience. How many people did I do PT with this morning? Y'all motivated the heck out of me. Let me tell you something. GMC is a very strong civil prep program. It's a strong military institution. And at West Point, like I told the people that I did PT with, you guys are the top civil preparatory program in the country. So give yourselves a round of applause for that. How many people in the room do we have currently from Milledgeville, Georgia? Anybody? Okay, so just a couple of you guys. How many people knew that you would end up where you are right now? A couple of you. Not very many of you. I'm the same way as most of you. I never knew that going to Georgia Military College would propel me the way that it did. I never knew that I would be going to the United States Military Academy at West Point. And I never knew that I would go on to graduate that academy as the fastest woman, not only in West Point history, but in Service Academy history. And I say those things not to brag, but to say that GMC and West Point completely changed the trajectory of my life. So for the next 15 to 20 minutes, I'm going to talk a little bit about my experiences, how I grew up, how I was raised, some of the things that I've gone through. And then I wanted to kind of open the floor for conversation, for questions. You can ask me about West Point if you want. You can ask me about leadership. Like Colonel Ramirez said, I had the opportunity to serve as a platoon leader, serve as an executive officer, serve as a rear detachment commander, battalion maintenance officer, and then headed back up to West Point and currently serving in the admissions department. So again, I'm Lieutenant Calli McMullen, and I'm currently working at the United States Military Academy in the capacity of the admissions department. So I'm on the other side of GMC, I'm on the other side of West Point, and decided to give back to my alma mater, my collegiate alma mater in this way by serving in admissions to help great students like you get into academies. But also, guess what? You guys are my first admissions trip. So I decided I wanted to make sure I gave back to my community in this way as well. So a little bit about me. Like Colonel Ramirez said, I was born and raised in Milledgeville, Georgia. My daddy grew up raising pigs and chickens in Sparta, Georgia. Anybody even know where Sparta, Georgia is? Okay, so a few of you. That's where my family's from, right? So my dad grew up on a farm with 7 siblings. My mother, she was a military brat, but there was nobody really in my family outside of my grandparents that were engaged in the military. So me being created, I had no idea that I was going to go on to be here and do everything that I did. When I came about, my brother had actually gone to GMC. He came here because he was a troublemaker. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands in the room if you are a troublemaker. It's okay. But he came to GMC to instill that level of discipline and leadership in his own life. And when I came of age, my parents gave me the choice. They said, hey, Calli, you can either choose to go to GMC for middle school or to another school in the area. I personally chose GMC as a middle schooler because I understood that it could potentially change my life, and that's exactly what it did. So I showed up here as a prep school student from 6th grade all the way up until 12th grade. Now, GMC is a very unique institution. There's no other institution like it literally in the world. If you wanted to, you could literally come to GMC from the time you are an elementary school student and spend the entirety of your education here all the way through the junior college. Isn't that wild? That's crazy, right? I ended up coming here 6th through 12th grade. While I was here, I not only participated in certain leadership positions, I was part of the National Honor Society Beta Club, graduated as valedictorian of my high school class. Track athlete, if you go to the gym, you'll probably see a few of my records. I ran all the short sprints, so 100, 200, 400, 4x1, 4x4, same thing at West Point. And I was also a cheerleader, also did one-act play, very involved in the community. But one of the beautiful things that I really enjoyed about my experience here, and I answered a question earlier about it today during PT, was that aspect of leadership, character, and service that you get here from this institution. My first time getting to practice as a platoon leader was in 8th grade. You don't get that anywhere else. This is the type of institution that prepares you for leadership like that. So many times what ends up happening is sometimes we don't get to practice our leadership until we're 18, 21, 22. This is a type of institution that is training people to practice those leadership skills from the time they are 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, or now even younger because of the elementary school. And again, I would go on to not only participate in leadership in that capacity, but during my senior year, and this is kind of when West Point started coming into the picture, I ended up serving as a battalion commander of my ROTC, or the JROTC program here, part of the high school. So I had gone from practicing being a platoon leader, being in charge of about 30 other young kids, to being responsible for the high school as a battalion commander, being responsible for about 250 high school kids. In that capacity, I just so happened to also be recruited for track and field, so I personally was looking at Duke University, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, as well as University of Tennessee, Memphis. And when I went up to West Point for my recruiting visit, that is when it completely changed my life, and I knew that West Point was the place for me. During that time, and I know a lot of you in this room, how many in the room are considering service academies? Okay, perfect. That's a lot of you. During my time on my visit, I got to see what life was truly like as a cadet, and cadets don't lie to you. They're going to tell you straight up what's real and what's not. So I got to see what life was like academically. I got to spend time in the classroom with the cadet I was with. I got to go, she was on the track team, so I got to go with her to practice. I got to see exactly what it was like and ask all the questions. That's why I'm really encouraging you guys today to ask all the questions that you possibly can. I don't want to leave here today without you guys getting your questions answered, because there are a lot of really cool experiences and things that people might not know about when it comes to the academies, okay? And again, it was at that moment that I knew that I wanted to go to West Point. And when I went to West Point, I continued to be involved, just like you guys are involved at GMC. I continued to be involved at West Point. And ran track and field, served on the gospel choir, was a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. All those things kind of came about. And again, I would go on to graduate as the fastest woman in West Point history and Service Academy history. And as mentioned, I commissioned as a signal officer. So that basically means that I deal a lot with communications, IT, cyber stuff, kind of intertwines a little bit. And in that position, I was placed in a responsibility when I went to Germany to serve dual-hatted as a platoon leader and executive officer for my company. So I had, and I mentioned this to the group earlier, so I had 12 different signal teams in 12 different countries, and it was my responsibility to manage all 12 of them along with the commander. And it was a great responsibility, a lot of responsibility, but the best part of it was my soldiers and that ability to establish trust with each and every single one of my soldiers. So I wanted to kind of gear the conversation now towards a little bit away from me and kind of some of the things that I've learned over my experience from GMC, West Point, and overall in life. How many of you know that life is hard? Everybody in this room is probably going through something. This institution in itself is hard. Can we all agree on that? Right? And that same breath, West Point, any academy that you go to is hard. Everything in life is difficult, especially if it's something that you want. How many of you also know that whenever you strive to actually achieve what it is that you want, it's almost like that's when all hell breaks loose, right? Yeah. I've experienced that personally as well. So one of my experiences at West Point, and I think GMC does a really good job of this too. GMC, and I told you guys this earlier, GMC and West Point have the exact same honor code. A cadet will not lie, cheat, steal, nor tolerate those who do. Character is really important. So you guys are getting the direct understanding and learning of what it is that you need to continue to propel yourselves forward. And I say that to say this, every single one of you in this room has a calling over your life in terms of what it is that you're supposed to do. And you know that. And again, we know that everything is difficult that we want to go after. GMC, West Point, any academy that you choose is no different. Sometimes we're going to face problems, we're going to face issues in our lives. And as we face those issues, sometimes I think we spend so much time focusing on the experience, focusing on that hardship, that we don't look at our outcome, our outlook. So intentionally, when I was at West Point, they had certain classes that you had to pass. So you had to take boxing, combatives, survival swimming. I was a really, really crappy swimmer. Survival swimming was a thing that I failed at. And I know when we are going to institutions like GMC, West Point, and the academies, a lot of times there's many type A personalities and we struggle with failure. And at that space, I had no choice but to humble myself and seek help from my peers, seek help from my instructors in order to pass that class. But there was one particular test that I kind of related it to a life lesson. So in survival swimming, you have to take what's called the wave test. The wave test is where you're getting in a wave pool, and that wave pool is trying to simulate oceanic waves. And at that same breath, in the ceiling, there's water coming down as if it's raining. They'll play thunder noises in the background to get you all riled up. They'll shoot lasers in the pool and all this stuff, right? You're swimming in your OCPs and your rifle. You have to swim in that ocean pool for about 5 to 10 minutes to pass the test. And what I realized, after I made it through that test, I was like, I survived this. And because I survived this, I could probably do this again. But for that particular test, what I learned was, and I'm going to relate this to life, every time you saw a kid go through that test, and when a wave came, and it didn't matter what kind of wave came, it didn't matter if the wave splashed them in their faces, it didn't matter any of those things, they were able to make it through to the other side. You could tell that that kid had hope. You could tell that that kid had a perspective, an outlook, an outcome of understanding that there was hope in that situation. Anytime there was someone who, when a wave hit them, they stressed out, they freaked out, they got water in their faces, it splashed them, they started drowning and flailing and freaking out, right? They started giving up. Those kids didn't make it through the test. And that taught me something. It's not just about our experiences. It's about our outlook on life when we face those experiences. You see, there's so many millionaires in the world and billionaires that have gone on to commit suicide, right? Because there was no hope for them. They had no outlook, no outcome beyond their money. And in that same breath, there are people that grew up on the other side of the tracks that are able to go on to do amazing things in society. That lets me know that it's not just about our experiences. It's about our perspective on life. So I kind of see outlook and outcome in kind of 3 ways. I see it as our mindset, our perspective, and our ability to trust. Mindset. What are you bringing to the table mentally right now in this moment, and whatever your hardship is? Your perspective. What is your outlook? Is there hope? And your trust. I see trust still in 3 parts. Trust in my faith. Trust in my institutions or my organizations that I'm a part of. And trust in myself. Everybody in the room knows I'm a track athlete, so I'm going to kind of relate that concept to what it means to run a race. I've run hundreds of races in my track career, and I could tell the times in which I was going to fail or lose or whatever based on those 3 things that I just brought up. When it comes to mindset, if I was approaching a race, I'm not confident, I can't do this, I'm not going to win, there's no hope. If my perspective was, I can't see this through the other end, I suck at this, I'm going to lose. And my trust, I didn't trust that with my faith, if I won or if I lost, I was going to be okay. I didn't trust in my coaches that they had poured the resources into me. And if I didn't trust in myself, if I wasn't confident in myself, that race went to crap. And in that same breath, the races in which I came to the table with a mindset of I'm confident, I'm competitive, and I'm able to execute. The races that I came to the table with a perspective that, okay, there's a potential for me to win here. I can do this. I'm going to see myself through this on the other side. And when I could trust in my faith that I was going to be okay regardless of if I won or if I lost, when I could trust that my coaches had poured into me, that my institution had poured into me, when I could trust that I was confident in myself, those are the times in which my races went very well. Either I came out on the other side with a win, a record, a trophy, or sometimes none of those things, but I had peace on the inside of my heart. Why am I saying all this to you? You guys are at a top leadership institution. GMC in itself is already difficult. I know that. I know that. And every single one of you in this room already raised your hands and said you understood the concept of hardship, which lets me know that it's not just GMC that's contributing to the hardship in your life. There's other things going on right now, and that's okay. But my challenge to you is this. Are you going to let your hardships, are you going to let your experiences dictate where you're going? Like I said earlier, every single one of you has a calling on the inside of your lives. And every single one of you knows exactly what it is. Some of you might not, but you're going to get there. But there's something that you're meant to do on this earth. And when you're facing the challenges that come your way that are trying to block you from achieving that calling, what's your mindset going to be? Is it going to be, I can do this, I can make it through GMC? Or is it not? Are you going to have hope through your perspective that you can get to the other side of this, or are you not? And are you going to trust? Are you going to trust in whatever faith you believe in or not? Are you going to trust in this institution? Are you going to trust GMC that it has the resources to pour into you in order to take care of you and sustain you to reach your goals? And are you going to trust yourself? Are you going to put the work in? How many athletes do I have in the room? Right? For all of my athletes, every single one of you know, you got to hold each other accountable to not skipping out on the workout, right? If my battle brother is skipping out on the workout, I got to hold him accountable, just like I have to hold myself accountable. So do I trust that I put in the work? I can't expect to win. I can't expect to get to the other side if I myself haven't put the work in. So again, I just wanted to leave that with each and every single one of you, because I do truly believe that everyone in this room has something, even if you don't know it yet, that you are meant and you are called to do, okay? And I want you to believe in that and understand that life is going to face, in life you're going to face hardship. There's going to be loss, there's going to be tragedy, there's going to be some crappy things that happen. But are you going to let those experiences themselves dictate your ability to reach your calling? Or are you going to come to the table with a mindset, a perspective, and an ability to trust that ensures that regardless of what you face, you're still able to go on to accomplish those amazing things, okay? I'm going to leave that with you, and I want to open the floor. If there's anyone in the room that wants to contribute to conversation or questions, please make sure you ask.
So guys, as you get up for questions, remember, say your name, where you're from, what kind of you are, and go ahead and ask your question. Cool?
Absolutely.
So, good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
My name's Cadet Porterfield. I'm from Savannah, Georgia.
Okay.
And I just wanted to say that I appreciate you coming out here and giving us your story. But my question was, who was the biggest impact in your life that helped you drive on when you're doing all your journey?
That's a great question. I personally, and this is me, I'm a very faith-based person. So for me, there have been times in my life in which sometimes a person might not be there for me. There are, especially in leadership, times in which they're so challenging and all of us are going through something that sometimes it might not be a person that you might have to rely on. And for me, I always was able to turn to my faith in my God to ensure that I would make it through my experiences. But other than that, I would say that it comes down to having a strong knit community. Everybody's opinion shouldn't have weight over your life. Let me just say that straight up, okay? If they can't contact you, if they don't have your number, like there's no reason that their opinion should influence your decision-making skills and abilities. And in that same breath, you have to make sure that the mentors and the community that you do have involved in your life truly do know who you are and what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Because sometimes our families and our friends can also influence us in directions that might not be healthy for us either. So I would say for me, it really does come down to trusting my faith. And then when it comes to, I don't want to put it on one person, but I do believe that there's community surrounding me from my parents, from my family. I've come to GMC now a couple of times. Every time I come home with welcome arms. And there's plenty of people in this community that I know I can go to for certain things in order to accomplish what it is that I need to. So great question. Yeah. Back there? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, and then can you get him in the back?
Good morning, ma'am. My name is Jordan Wilson. I'm from Auburn, Alabama, and I'm a West Point scholar. My question is there anything that changed how you view yourself, the Corps, the Army, etc., while you were at West Point or while you were during your service as an officer?
Yeah, great question. I think as a kid, it's really easy to get, and we do this all the time. You participate in a sport, you get a trophy, it becomes about you. You participate in whatever your club or whatever is, and you get recognized for it, and it becomes about you. And I think for a long time, there was that challenge for me because I was so readily given awards and trophies and all this stuff. I had to shift that mentality of, wait a minute, this is not about me. And I think that really was able to change when I finally got soldiers under my care. They were my dogs. To this day, I will say I keep in touch with majority of my soldiers as well as my platoon sergeant. I think that when it comes to this organization, when I say this organization, I mean the armed forces overall, it really comes down to people. and understanding that it is not about you. It is about the mission, but the mission, in order for that mission to be accomplished, you have to build a unified and diverse team. And you can only build that team once you establish a level of trust. And trust comes from vulnerability and relationship. You have to make sure that you are building connections with people over time in order to build that trust, in order to build that connection. And so when it came to my soldiers, I knew I could trust them in those 12 different countries to do what they were going to do because we had already established that relationship. We were here, we were locked in. So I think when it comes down to it, it was really shifting the perspective of this isn't about me to this is about accomplishing something so much greater than ourselves, and we can do that as a unified team. Great question. That gentleman in the back, I know he had his hand up for a minute. One of you, who was it? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, let him get the microphone to you so I can hear you. Appreciate it.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good
My
morning.
name is Cadet Oderman. I'm a Coast Guard Academy scholar from Titusville, Florida. I wanted to ask, when talking about interpersonal relationships and people that have different backgrounds, cultures, and languages, how do you handle that to build a successful team, ma'am?
Great question. I think one of the biggest things is understanding the strengths that each team member brings to the table. I was a really crappy swimmer, like I said at West Point. So I had no choice but to rely on really good swimmers that were able and willing to give me their time to help me. In that same breath, people knew I was a really good runner. So they would come to me to get that running training. So it really comes down to when it comes to, I think a lot of times we let the diversity of the team separate us. And that is not what we should be doing. We should be playing onto the strengths of each team member and what they're able to contribute to the team. And in our teammates' weakness, it's our job to pick our brother or our sister up, right? That's our responsibility. I think a lot of times, though, what happens is you've got someone who's completely different from the team. That person gets ostracized from the team. Everybody else on the team starts pushing that person away instead of bringing them in and reeling them in, especially when they have a lot of weaknesses. So as a leader, one of the biggest challenges is when you find that weak link, try to figure out what that soldier, what that person's strengths are. Try to, again, establish a relationship with them, a connection with them, a mutual ground in order to get you guys talking and having a conversation. Great question. Go ahead. Yeah. He's got the mic? Okay, perfect.
Good morning, ma'am. My name is Andrew Serrato. I'm a West Point scholar from Southampton, New York.
Nice.
My question is, if you have like a poor mindset or perspective, like what are some of the ways you go about changing it to like better yourself?
Great
and improve
question.
Yourself?
That's a great question because I always get really frustrated when I hear people tell me what to do, but they don't tell me the how, right? And so for me, that how I kind of shifted that mindset over time was, one, going back to the mentors and the community, having people in my life that could hold me accountable and put me in check. Everybody needs that. Because if it is only us in our own brains telling us what to believe and what to think and not having any diversified backgrounds or perspectives to contribute to the table, then we will continue moving through life thinking that a certain way is the only way. So it really comes down to making sure you do have that community of mentors to and again, not everybody is allowed to be in your circle. You do need to make sure you have a circle of people that you do trust that can truly tell you about yourself. In that same breath, I think the other part of that is just going through life and having certain experiences and learning, choosing to learn from our experiences. Sometimes I think we miss out on the little moments that are so beautiful and crucial that we can learn from. For example, if you're walking through the hallway and you see two peers getting in an argument, what do? Do you actually interject and say, hi, like, can I help, what's going on, or do you walk away, right? Or if you walk away, what's going on in your mind as you're walking away? Oh, I should have said something. Oh, like, what's going on over there, right? Allowing our experiences in life to teach us something and to learn from those things as well can kind of help shift that perspective. Great question. Yeah. Who's got a mic? Yeah, go ahead.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good
My
morning.
name is Emerald Littleton. I'm from Huntsville, Alabama, participating in the ECP program. And the question I have for you is, what adversities have you had to overcome during your time in the Army? Yeah.
Absolutely, great question. So going back to diversity and the lack thereof sometimes, in my platoon, one of the challenges that I had to face was I was the only woman in my platoon, leading a platoon of 40 men. And sometimes that could get really challenging because, again, there's different perspectives, there's different perceptions of certain things. And I'm coming to, and I trust that every single person in this room is of a mature mindset. But some soldiers are not necessarily that way, and they will say crazy stuff just to get you riled up. And so there were certain times in which I had to check some of my soldiers for some of the things that they said. And eventually it came down to me having to establish that relationship with my platoon sergeant so that I wasn't the only one fighting for myself. So when it came to that relationship with that platoon sergeant, that right-hand person in the platoon that is really responsible for those enlisted personnel, for me, it was, hey, dog, like, I'm having an issue with these soldiers. They're being really disrespectful. They're saying degrading comments towards women. Like, I need your help. And, like, again, as soon as I was able to establish that level of trust and relationship with my platoon sergeant, like, that mess was checked, right? And it came down to, over time, again, building that level of respect within the platoon, even though I was different from them and they were different from me, being able to establish those relationships with those guys and learn what it is, like who they were, who their families were, who their kids were, who their spouses were, and getting so in depth in creating a family that there was no desire to not respect me anymore. And in that same breath, it also came down to, once I established that trust, that is when I was able to get in and say, yo, remember back when you said this to me? Like, this was wrong for this, this, and this reason, right? And because I was able to establish that trust, they were able to actually listen and take in what I was saying. And so now I'm ensuring that I'm producing a quality soldier that is not going to do that kind of stuff or say that kind of stuff or be a certain way when they go on to their next unit, right? So great question. I think, yeah, go ahead. And then that dude in the back, he's had his hand up for a minute, too.
Good morning, ma'am. My name is Carlos Cifuentes. I'm from Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I'm an ECP cadet. What is the biggest takeaway that you can say that you got from your platoon sergeant when building that, trust and connection with your platoon sergeant as, that you can share for, us future lieutenants?
Absolutely. I think, one, I want to say this. Never underestimate the power that platoon sergeant holds. I've seen some really tricky situations with some other platoon leaders where when they're butting heads and not establishing that trusting relationship with their platoon sergeant, it creates a divide within the platoon. So the biggest thing I can encourage each of you, when you get a platoon, is to make sure you're establishing that relationship with your platoon sergeant and doing initial counseling so that you're laying out the expectations. You guys do initial counselings with each other? No? Okay. I see yes, no, some, maybe so. Okay, yes. Do an initial counseling with your platoon sergeant to lay out your expectations for that individual. But in that same breath, understand that platoon sergeant has a plethora of years of experience beyond you. So if they are saying something to you, I don't want to say just take it for face value. It's okay to check your information. But make sure you're respecting their level of expertise as well, because that's what it comes down to. In order to establish that level of trust, you've got to come from a place of saying, I'm going to humble myself because I know you know this job. You know, soldier, you've been in this game for 17, 20 years. I'm just showing up as a brand new second lieutenant. And a lot of you might have soldier experience. I know we got some people, National Guard in here, anybody? Yeah, we got some National Guard people. So you guys have an experience with service. And so you can bring that to the table as well. And again, it just garners that level of relationship and respect. So great question. Yeah.
Morning, ma'am. My name is Connor Hernandez. I'm from Woodbridge, Virginia, and I'm a Coast Guard scholar. I wanted to ask, regarding hope, what's the closest you ever came to giving up, and how did you overcome that challenge?
Great question. All right. Y'all ready for my vulnerability? Because I'm going to give it to you. Yes, ma'am. All right. So, at my last unit, I had an extremely toxic boss. Extremely toxic boss. To the point where we had people in the unit experiencing suicidal ideations and all that kind of stuff because of who he was. He ended up getting fired eventually. But I was his executive officer. So how it kind of works in a company, you have the company commander who's in charge of the company, the first sergeant who's the company commander's right-hand person, and then you've got the executive officer. The executive officer is the senior lieutenant in the company that is also advising the company commander. At that time, I was the executive officer for this super toxic commander. He was saying crazy stuff, doing crazy stuff. Whenever we had missions, there would be times in which he would make decisions that would put the soldiers' lives at risk, and he would have myself and the first sergeant being like, sir, like, we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do this. He would cuss us out, he would say crazy stuff, really degrading stuff, unnecessary stuff that doesn't need to be repeated in this room. It was at that time that I lost hope, because again, it felt like I was begging and pleading and screaming and scratching for this man to change his ways and how he was treating soldiers, and it felt like nothing was happening. It felt like no change was happening. And going back to my faith, it took me relying on my faith in that sense to get through that time, but also continuing to press forward with communicating the things I needed to his boss, as well as the boss above him. So what I ended up doing was when I got out of when I communicated to the battalion commander that there were issues, i.e. the company commander's boss, he immediately moved me from the position, which is what he needed to do in order to get me out of there and move me somewhere else. In that same breath, even though that protected me, it didn't protect the soldiers. The soldiers were still left with this commander. So I was like, what can I do to ensure that now I'm out of this situation, I can continue to help my soldiers? So I continued to go to the battalion commander, and then I went up a level above that. I went to the brigade commander. I had a one-on-one with the brigade commander about the situation going on in that company. And it literally took months. But by the time I had left that unit, they had eventually fired that guy, got them a new commander. And that commander is really great. He's a phenomenal guy. Got him finally the commander that they deserve. But I say all that to say that that was a situation in which I truly lost hope, because it didn't feel like there was anything that was going to change or shift from that dynamic. But I think what kind of shifted was my ability to be persistent and communicating to the battalion commander. And there were multiple people fighting from multiple angles. So I was also talking to the brigade commander, the battalion commander was talking to the brigade commander. So there were multiple people kind of supporting this effort to ensure that this could change. Yeah, great question.
Good morning, ma'am. My name's Audrey Shirk. I'm a Coast Guard Academy scholar from Paducah, Kentucky.
I got to meet you this morning.
Yes, ma'am. My question to you is, if you could go back in time, whether it be to you when you were first going to the prep school or when you were fourth class at the academy, what advice would you give yourself if you could go back in time?
That's a great question. I would say to enjoy every moment. I think when let me say this, we are in a very busy culture. Everybody just wants to be busy, just doing a million things. And when you're so busy, you're not taking the time to actually enjoy what it is that you're doing. It's okay to have hobbies and it's okay to do a whole bunch of stuff, but please make sure you're taking the time to enjoy it. I realized this. My grandmother, she passed away a day before my West Point graduation. That woman was born in 1928, and she died in 2020. She had lived through the Black Codes. She had lived through Jim Crow era. She had lived through the establishment of the computer. She had lived through the transition of women in the military. She had lived through the development of the iPhone and all this technology and TikTok, right? She died in 2020. And I, as a kid, was so caught up. I was a classical ballerina, did track and field, cheerleading, all this stuff. And when I would talk to my grandma, right, I would have like 3 to 5 minute conversations with her and get off the phone. And when she passed away, that's when I was like, dang, this woman has literally made history. She served in the Army Women's Nurse Corps. It was one of the top nurses, women nurses in Columbus, Georgia at the time. I didn't know any of this history. I didn't take the time to dwell in that, right? I say all that to say this. You guys are at GMC right now. I know it's hard to enjoy every moment sometimes. When we were on the run this morning, I heard a couple of ladies. Who was it that said that was really fun, right? Who was it? Yes, thank you for saying that. That was you living in the moment, recognizing that this is a beautiful moment right now. Like, dang, this was fun. Calling cadence, I'm with my crew. Like, I'm motivated to do this. Every time you have an opportunity to just dwell in your present, do that. So to answer your question, that was something I didn't do a lot of. I was so head down, so focused. Even when it came to my track career, it was almost every race I was getting an award, breaking a record, getting a medal, but it was like I had to move on to the next thing. I got to accomplish the next thing. I got to get to NCAAs. I got to get to regionals. Like, I was never taking the time to just truly enjoy. And then when COVID hit, all that got taken away. My track career got taken away. No more races. Had to go home. Grandmother passed away around that time. So again, like just, it was COVID that hit and made me really think about like, dang, I really didn't take the time to value my friendships, value my relationships, value even running all these races and standing up on the podium. Like I'll never get to stand on a podium again, right? But I can think back to those moments and imagine how beautiful they are. So never let these moments pass you by because they are so precious. You only have so much time, right? So make sure that you're dwelling in your present and enjoying your moment. That's what I would say.
Last question.
Thanks, Kerr.
Over here. Good morning, ma'am. My name is Leandrew Sims. I'm a civic leader cadet here at
You said
GMC.
you're from where?
I'm from Covington, Georgia.
Okay, gotcha.
And my question to you is, knowing that you have a busy schedule at the West Point Academy between being you an actual cadet and an athlete, so I know more times go into being a cadet and also an athlete as well, where do you find time to emphasize your education and make time for your studies?
Boom, great question. I mentioned earlier to the people that did PT with me that it is about boundaries and setting limits. Everybody is going to compete for your time. You have to learn the value of your time. And I'll be honest with you, this is something that I'm just now getting to understand because I used to think, oh, because people want me to give them my time, I'm important, so let me continue to pour into them and give them my time, give these things my time. That's a lot of work. That's a lot on you. That's extra. There are going to be times you have to shut it off. So, for example, going back to your specific question about how it kind of relates to West Point and your schedule and all that, you're going to have times where you're going to have a history teacher telling you you have to read 80 pages. All right, sir, I'm going to give you 40, and then I'm going to move on to the next. And I'm going to come to the classroom being prepared to talk about the 40 pages that I read, because you're not going to sit in class and not do nothing. And then you're going to move on to that math assignment, and your math teacher is going to say, I want you to spend 2 hours doing this equation. All right, sir, I'm going to give you 45 minutes, and I'm going to move on to the next thing, right? You've got to understand the value of your time and move on. And the beauty of that, the reality of it is, West Point and all the other academies know, they know. There's historical documentation of this. They do data on this and run studies. They know they're giving you more than hours in the day that you have. They know that. The test, it's a test. The test is, what are you going to value? What do you put your time towards? You can say, all right, I'm going to spend from 7:30 at night till 3 o'clock in the morning doing all my homework. And people do that. Or you could say, I'm going to spend 7:30 to 10 o'clock doing my homework. Then at 10 o'clock, I'm going to take a shower. I'm going to get ready for bed. I'm going to do my skincare. And then we're going to go to sleep, right? That's up to you. But we have to start building those muscles of knowing how to do that. And it comes with establishing your boundaries and knowing the value of your time. Yeah, great question. Great last question. All right, y'all. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for your energy and for your attention. I don't know if I'm going to have the opportunity to see you guys later today, but if you do pass by me in the hallway or something, please say hello. Again, my name is Lieutenant Calli McMullen, and I look forward to hearing about all the great things that you guys go on to do. Thank you.